What happens when the youngest White House press secretary in U.S. history walks onto The Daily Show, unedited, and faces off against Jon Stewart himself? What begins as a planned takedown turns into a stunning reversal no one saw coming. The tweet hit Karoline Leavitt's phone just as she was finishing a press briefing at the White House. Short, sharp, provocative. Karoline Leavitt says she's not afraid of tough questions? Great. Come to Studio 9B unedited. Let's talk signal, let's talk Trump, let's talk truth. Jon Stewart. It wasn't a request, it was a challenge wrapped in sarcasm, fired straight into the bloodstream of the internet. Within minutes, Leavitt v. Stewart was trending on X. Pundits weighed in like it was a boxing match. She won't show. He'll destroy her. Finally, someone to expose the Trump machine. But Karoline didn't flinch. She read the post twice, calmly set her phone down, and exhaled slowly. She had expected this moment to come eventually. You don't stand at the White House podium at 27 defending Donald Trump without knowing that someone, somewhere, will try to make you a punchline. That evening, back at her D.C. townhouse, Karoline sat on the edge of her bed, the glow of the screen lighting up her determined face. She knew exactly what Jon Stewart was planning. Ambush satire, mock the faith, mock the youth, mock the loyalty. But she also knew something else. You can't be humiliated if you refuse to be small. She opened X, typed 4 words, and hit send. I'm in, unedited. The tweet lit up within seconds. Journalists scrambled. Cable panels buzzed, her phone lit up with calls from advisors, strategists, and even her mother. Are you sure? They asked. He's not just gonna poke fun, he's gonna try to wreck you. But Karoline already knew. And still, she didn't back down. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every time someone dismissed her as Trump's Gen Z puppet. Every time a reporter smirked during briefings. Every time the media treated belief like a punchline and patriotism like a costume. She wasn't walking into Studio 9B for a laugh. She was walking in to reclaim the narrative and to remind Jon Stewart that age doesn't equal ignorance and satire doesn't equal truth. Tomorrow, the stage would be his, but the voice? That would be hers. Inside the glass-walled hive of Studio 9B at the Gotham Media Complex, the mood was electric, half comedy writer's room, half war council. The overhead lights hummed, production assistants scurried between whiteboards and camera setups, and Jon Stewart paced like a general preparing for a siege. His sleeves were rolled up, reading glasses perched on his forehead, a yellow notepad clenched in one hand, half covered in scribbles. Signal leak MAGA puppet, faith joke. Too far? Across from him stood Vivian Marks, his lead segment producer, arms folded, eyes sharp behind cat-eye glasses. She wasn't smiling. We need everything on her, Jon said, tapping the notepad against the side of his leg. Every press briefing, every tweet, every blip with signal. If she so much as sneezed near a scandal, I want it cued. Vivian motioned toward the screen behind them, already displaying side-by-side clips. One of Karoline defending Trump's foreign policy moves, another of pundits speculating on her involvement in the now infamous Signal group chat leak. The story, already viral weeks ago, was ready for a second wave. What's the hook? Jon asked, more to himself than anyone else. She's young, loyal, polished, but can she think without a script? Vivian stepped in, voice crisp. Don't underestimate her, Jon. She's survived the DC press corps. You don't do that unless you're sharp, but we hit the audience with the contrast. You're the grizzled vet, she's the shiny new recruit. Jon grinned. And this old vet's got teeth. A writer tossed him a mock-up prop, a printed screenshot of a fake Signal message that read, "Don't worry, I'll handle the press." Jon chuckled, already hearing the crowd's reaction. I'll say it's fake, but just real enough to sting. They rehearsed the beats, faith jokes, 1, maybe 2, age punchlines, soften them with charm, then go in hard on the leak. Paint her as incompetent, overwhelmed, unqualified. We don't need to destroy her, Jon said, half smiling, just remind the audience why she's not the adult in the room. He paused, then added with practiced theatricality, and if she panics, if she crumbles on air, all the better. Vivian leaned in, voice lowered. But what if she doesn't? Jon looked at her, the smirk flickering, then returning. then I'll still be me. I've danced with senators, billionaires, war criminals. She's a kid with a podium. He said it with confidence. But beneath the bravado, Vivian caught a flicker of something else. Respect, maybe. Or wariness. The control room buzzed. Camera feeds switched to standby. The countdown to taping had begun. Karoline Leavitt was scheduled to arrive in 30 minutes, and when she walked through those doors, it wouldn't be just another segment. It would be a generational collision. Truth, power, and satire locked in the same studio. And only one story would walk out alive. The black SUV rolled up to the back entrance of the Gotham Media Complex, its windows tinted, engine humming low like it knew not to draw attention. Inside, Karoline Leavitt sat still, eyes focused, breath measured. Dressed in a tailored navy suit with clean lines and sharp shoulders, she looked more like she was stepping into a state summit than a comedy show. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek twist, no loose strands, no distractions. At 27, she had faced entire press rooms filled with hostile questions. But this would be different. This wasn't a briefing, this was a stage, a trap. And she was walking in anyway. The moment she stepped onto the backstage corridor of Studio 9B, the energy shifted. Staffers looked up from clipboards and cables, some doing double takes. She wasn't what they expected. No trembling intern or defensively smug operative, she was composed, unreadable. Her press aide trailed behind her but didn't speak. Karoline didn't need a pep talk. She needed a podium. A showrunner greeted her awkwardly, offering tea, water, whatever she wanted. She declined everything but a minute alone. They led her to the green room, a sleek space with velvet couches and wall-mounted screens, showing a live feed of the studio where Jon Stewart was warming up the crowd. The laughter was already rising. Loud, eager, expectant. Karoline sat watching the monitor. Jon was on stage now, sleeves rolled, smirk in place, pacing like a man who believed he owned every inch of the room. He cracked a pre-show joke about the baby press secretary with a Bible in one hand and a burner phone in the other. The audience roared. She didn't blink. She'd been mocked before, belittled on national television, ridiculed in op-eds that barely disguised their contempt, but never like this, never unedited, and never face-to-face. A production assistant knocked gently on the door. 5 minutes, Miss Leavitt. She stood, smoothed her jacket, adjusted the small microphone clipped to her lapel. Her reflection stared back from the dark screen. Steady gaze, straight spine, no fear. She whispered a single line under her breath, not for prayer, not for courage, but for focus. This is not his story to write. As she stepped toward the stage wings, the lights grew brighter, the laughter louder, but inside her there was only stillness. The lion's den waited, and she was walking in without a sword, just the truth. The lights of Studio 9B flared hot and theatrical, casting a sleek sheen over the steel and glass set as the audience erupted into wild applause. Jon Stewart stepped into the spotlight like a rock star slipping into a familiar riff, his trademark smirk firmly in place. Clad in a casual blazer, open collar, and rolled-up sleeves, he radiated the ease of a man used to owning the room. He waved, took his seat behind the desk, and tapped it twice like knocking on a door before kicking it open. "Welcome to The Daily Show, folks," he began, voice rich with glee. "Tonight is special. No filter, no edits, just raw truth and the youngest press secretary in U.S. history, Karoline Leavitt." He paused, letting the applause roll back in. Then the grin twisted. "You've seen her clips. She's Trump's Gen Z gladiator, marching into press briefings like she's got the Constitution in one hand and a group chat in the other." Laughter exploded across the studio. Karoline waited just off stage, hands folded neatly, listening to every syllable. Jon pressed on. "But tonight she's not hiding behind a podium or a polished statement. No." She said, and I quote, "I'm not afraid of Jon Stewart," he leaned toward the camera, eyes gleaming, "which is good, because this isn't going to be a pillow fight." The audience whooped. He slapped a stack of note cards onto the desk. "Now before she walks out here, let's all remember, Karoline was at the center of what I'm calling Signalgate, a mysterious signal chat, supposedly about a potential military strike, and, oops, someone accidentally looped in a journalist. Just a little oopsie-daisy while coordinating comms on national security. He tilted his head, mock concern written across his face. But she says it's fake news. Of course she does. They always do. Jon pulled out a blown-up, obviously fake printout of a signal message. Here's what I imagine she sent, he announced with theatrical flair, holding it up for the camera. The message read, "Don't worry, I'll handle the press. Trump, hit the Houthis now." The crowd roared as he feigned horror. "Looks real, right?" he said deadpan. "It's not, but neither is half the stuff coming out of that press room." More laughter. The stage lights burned brighter, feeding off the energy. He stood, striding around the desk with mock solemnity. "So, Karoline, you said you'd come unedited. You said you're not afraid, and I admire that, really. I just hope you brought more than Bible verses and talking points, because tonight we're not playing politics. We're playing for keeps." The audience clapped again, sensing the beginning of a verbal prize fight. Then came the cue. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jon boomed, voice rising above the crowd, "please welcome to The Daily Show, Karoline Leavitt." The spotlight shifted, the side curtain parted, and the room leaned forward as one. She stepped into the light. Steady, silent, and utterly unshaken. Karoline hadn't even finished sitting before Jon struck. "So," he began, voice smooth, eyes glinting, "Karoline Leavitt, Trump's Gen Z press secretary, 27 years old, leading White House briefings, and now here on The Daily Show. Brave or reckless, we'll find out together." The audience chuckled, and Jon didn't wait for a response. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk like a man settling in to dissect a subject. "Let's get right to it. Signal. The leak." The now famous group chat where, allegedly, a journalist got looped in on classified discussions. "You said it wasn't your doing, but come on, you're the press secretary. If you're not controlling the message, who is?" Karoline opened her mouth to respond, but Jon raised a hand. Wait. I want to help tell your story." He turned dramatically to the audience. "Imagine this, Karoline, in the White House, phone in one hand, rosary beads in the other." He mimed frantic texting, "Dear God help me, and also hit the Houthis now." The crowd burst into laughter. He pulled out the same mock signal message from earlier, waved it like a confession letter. "Don't worry, I'll handle the press. Trump, hit the Houthis now," he read, grinning. "It's fake, but let's be honest, it's not that fake." The laughter rolled again, louder this time. Jon fed off it like fuel. "You know, I'm not anti-faith," he said, feigning sincerity. "But if you're going to pray before you send a text, maybe pray for a spell checker, or at least make sure Jeffrey Goldberg isn't in the thread." More laughter, now mixed with a few whistles from the crowd. "Look, you're young. That's not the insult. But you're walking around with a nuclear mic, and when you trip, we all hear the boom." Karoline sat still, hands resting gently on her lap, her expression composed but firm. She knew this tactic: mock the person, turn them into a cartoon, get the crowd to laugh at them before they even speak, paint the opponent as incompetent, out of their depth, and then pretend the punchlines are truth. But what Jon didn't realize yet, what the audience hadn't seen, was that she wasn't here to play defense. She was here to rewrite the rules of the game. And while the first blow had landed with theatrical precision, it wouldn't be the one that defined the night. Karoline waited for the laughter to subside. Her fingers stayed loosely clasped, not a flicker of panic in her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice cut clean through the residual chuckles. Not loud, not defensive, but grounded. "Jon," she said calmly, "I'm not here to out-joke you. You're the comedian. I'm here because you called for truth. So let's talk about that." The room shifted slightly. The energy paused, not fully turning but no longer running entirely on Stewart's momentum. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued but still smirking, tapping a pen against his desk like a drum roll. "Go on," he said, half challenging. Karoline nodded toward the screen behind them where The Daily Show often ran supporting clips. "You called me a puppet, a mouthpiece, a believer in fairy tales. But what does that make you when your own past says the opposite of what you preach now?" She glanced off stage, giving a subtle signal. The screen behind Jon flickered, and suddenly an older Daily Show segment from nearly a decade ago filled the frame. There he was, Jon Stewart, arguing passionately in support of temporary limitations on certain speech to protect democracy during times of instability. His tone had been somber, not satirical. The clip ended with Stewart saying, "Sometimes free speech doesn't mean free of consequence." The audience quieted. Some shifted in their seats. Jon stiffened ever so slightly. "That's you," Karoline said, her tone firm but not gloating. "You supported censorship when it fit your narrative. Now you call me a propagandist for defending this administration's policies, even when I say the Signal story was inflated. You don't want truth, you want a villain." Jon leaned back, visibly trying to recover the upper hand. "That clip's ancient. I've evolved," he quipped. "We all grow, right?" He smiled wide, trying to reel the crowd back. But Karoline didn't let go. "I agree," she replied quickly. "Growth is good, but mocking me for my age, my faith, and my job while ignoring your own contradictions? That's not growth, Jon, that's performance." A few audience members clapped. Just a handful, but enough to slice the atmosphere. It wasn't a full turn, but it was the first audible sign of shift. Karoline leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving Stewart's. "You asked for unedited, so here it is. You can make fun of me, but you don't get to erase context just to get a laugh. Truth isn't always funny." Jon tried to laugh again, but this time it rang a little hollow. The rhythm was off. His setup had landed. But the punchline had stumbled on something heavier than a joke, and the woman he thought would flinch? She was still sitting tall, still speaking clearly, and now the audience was starting to listen. The reversal hadn't come with shouting. It had come with stillness, with precision, and with a clip Jon never thought she'd have the nerve or the strategy to bring. For a moment, Studio 9B held its breath. The laughter that had dominated the first half of the interview had faded into something quieter, curiosity, maybe even discomfort. Jon Stewart blinked at the screen where his own past words had just played like a mirror he hadn't asked to see. He straightened in his chair, preparing another quip, but Karoline spoke before he could reload. "You say I'm a puppet because I stand at a podium and speak on behalf of an administration," she said, her tone controlled, deliberate. "But what does it make you when you sit here every night, funded by media conglomerates, pretending to be the underdog while doing their bidding?" There it was, the shift. A few people in the audience clapped. Not ironically, not politely, they meant it. And Jon felt it. His smirk faltered. "You're going after my sponsors now?" he asked, laughing, but the laugh didn't carry the same weight. "That's straight out of the Trump playbook." But Karoline didn't retreat. She leaned forward, eyes locked. "No, Jon, it's out of the truth playbook. You call me out for being young, for praying, for working under Trump, but you don't dare question the billionaires who write your checks. You don't punch up anymore, you just punch sideways." Scattered applause broke out again, louder this time, and when Karoline turned toward the audience, not the cameras, not Stewart, but the actual people in the room, something clicked. "You laughed when he mocked my faith," she said gently. "But would you have laughed if I weren't conservative? If I were a 27-year-old Democrat with a different necklace? Would that joke still be funny?" The room shifted once more, this time visibly, arms folded, heads tilted. A few audience members looked down at their laps. Jon shifted in his seat, cracking his knuckles, clearly trying to regroup. "You're good," he admitted, forcing a chuckle. "I'll give you that. But don't pretend you're the truth teller here." Karoline didn't smile. "I'm not pretending anything," she replied. "I came here with my name, my record, and my voice. No script, no fake screenshots. You're the one who needed props to set the stage." That was it. The line, the turning point. The audience, now fully awake, applauded hard and sustained. Jon blinked again, this time not in amusement, but in recognition. The room wasn't laughing anymore. It was listening. Jon Stewart tapped his pen twice on the desk, a subtle but telling sign that he was off rhythm. The crowd's laughter had thinned, and the applause for the first time all night hadn't been for him. Karoline Leavitt sat across from him, still and steady, while he recalibrated behind a practiced smile. "Okay," he said, trying to summon a more cutting tone. "So you flipped an old clip on me. Cute, but let's get back to Signal, shall we?" He leaned forward, trying to sharpen the edge again. "You're the press secretary. You were in that chat. If it wasn't your fault, whose was it? Or do we all just pretend a journalist got added by divine accident?" Karoline didn't flinch. "You're so sure the story is scandalous because you want it to be," she said quietly. "It's easier to mock than to consider that not everything you don't like is a conspiracy or incompetence." Her voice was soft, but the audience heard it. Jon opened his mouth again, aiming for another round, but this time Karoline cut him off. "Jon, you're not asking questions. You're performing questions, and that's not journalism, that's theater." The room stilled again. The tension wasn't electric anymore. It was dense. Jon stood suddenly, pacing briefly behind the desk. "Oh, so now you're the media expert? You work for Trump, Karoline." His voice was louder now, a bit too sharp. "The same guy who declared war on the press. Don't sit there and act like you're some crusader for truth." But Karoline's response landed with pinpoint calm. "I don't act like anything," she said. "You invited me here to expose me, but all I've done is answer you. Without insults, without a script, and without needing to break a coffee mug to get attention." That hit hard. The audience, sensing the shift in tone, stayed quiet. No laughter, no applause, just silence, punctuated by a long breath Jon took before sitting back down. He tried to shrug it off, forced a laugh that didn't quite land. "You're playing tough tonight, Leavitt," he muttered. She offered the faintest smile. "No, Jon," she replied. "I'm just not playing your game." And in that moment, everyone watching live or from behind a screen realized the punchline had shifted. The comedian was no longer the one writing the script. By now, the lights of Studio 9B felt less like spotlights and more like interrogation lamps, and they weren't pointed at Karoline Leavitt anymore. Jon Stewart, once so firmly in control, now sat quieter, blinking a little more between questions, his trademark smirk slipping just enough to show the strain beneath it. Across from him, Karoline hadn't raised her voice once. She didn't need to. Her calm had become the sharpest weapon in the room. Every time Jon tried to goad her with a joke, she countered with clarity. Every time he reached for the audience's laughter, she redirected their focus. And now, for the first time in the segment, it was Jon, not Karoline, who looked like he was trying to recover. "I came here unedited like you asked," she said, her tone even. "I didn't expect an easy time, but I expected honesty. Instead, I got props and punchlines. But I'm still here, still answering. Can you say the same?" A hush settled over the studio. The question wasn't rhetorical. It was a mirror. Jon opened his mouth, but no retort came, just a chuckle, thin and off-tempo. "You've got fire, I'll give you that," he muttered, gripping the edge of the desk. "And you've got a platform," Karoline replied, "but maybe tonight you remembered what it feels like to be challenged on it." Applause erupted, this time full, sustained, and no longer hesitant. It wasn't a victory cheer. It was recognition. The audience had shifted. The balance of power had tipped. And Jon Stewart, for all his reputation and reach, was no longer the only storyteller in the room. Karoline Leavitt hadn't just survived the lion's den. She'd made the lion blink. Backstage at Studio 9B, the air was thick with disbelief. Production staff shuffled quietly, avoiding eye contact as Jon Stewart pulled off his mic, rubbing the back of his neck. He forced a smile for the crew, but it didn't reach his eyes. For the first time in years, he hadn't just been matched, he'd been outmaneuvered. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt stood in the green room, surrounded by silence, not celebration. Her aide handed her a bottle of water, but she didn't drink. She was still steady, still focused, as if the adrenaline hadn't yet caught up. She had walked into a room designed to humiliate her, and walked out, having reshaped the story. Outside the studio, a small crowd had gathered. Reporters waited, phones in hand, ready for a statement. Karoline simply stepped into the cool Brooklyn night and smiled faintly. No need for a victory lap, The interview would speak for itself. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. She said nothing. Inside, Jon sat alone at his desk for a moment longer. The studio lights dimmed and the echoes of applause had long since faded. He stared at the fake signal message still lying beside him on the table. It didn't feel so funny anymore. The punchline hadn't landed the way he expected, and now the audience was already rewriting the narrative without him. The storm had passed, but the forecast had changed, and everyone, Jon included, knew they'd just witnessed a shift no edit could erase. Within minutes of the episode airing, clips from The Daily Show interview were everywhere. Karoline Leavitt facing down Jon Stewart, Karoline playing the old censorship clip, Karoline asking if he'd ever question his corporate sponsors. It hit social media like a tidal wave. Hashtags like, "Leavitt owns Stewart," "Not your clown owns Stewart," and "Not your clown" trended across platforms. Conservative voices hailed her as a rising star, the Gen Z firebrand who stared down the king of liberal satire. Even some moderates and traditional Stewart fans begrudgingly admitted she hadn't just held her own, she'd turned the tables. News networks jumped on the story. Fox News ran highlights with blazing titles like "Karoline Strikes Back," while even left-leaning anchors at CNN and MSNBC acknowledged the clash didn't go as expected. Jon's camp posted a short clip with the caption, "Unedited, uncomfortable, unforgettable." But in the comments section, thousands weren't praising his boldness, they were dissecting his missteps. At the White House, Trump's inner circle celebrated. The president himself posted on Truth Social, "Karoline Leavitt just embarrassed Jon Stewart on his own show. She's smart, tough, and unshakable. Total winner." But beyond the politics and memes, something bigger was happening. Karoline Leavitt had gone from being the press secretary with a Bible to a symbol of defiant, poised young conservatism. She didn't yell, she didn't flinch, and in doing so she forced America to ask, in an age where comedy often masquerades as commentary, who really owns the truth? For once the answer didn't come from behind a desk, it came from across it. The story of Karoline Leavitt on The Daily Show isn't just about a political clash. It's a powerful lesson in presence, conviction, and narrative control. Faced with mockery, pressure, and a room designed to humiliate her, Karoline didn't fight fire with fire. She didn't match Jon Stewart's satire with sarcasm or anger. Instead, she used stillness, truth, and calm to flip the script in real time. The lesson here is clear. You don't need to be loud to be powerful, and you don't need to control the room to command it. In an age where viral outrage and clever edits often shape public opinion, Karoline showed that clarity and composure can cut deeper than any punchline. She also revealed something often forgotten in modern discourse. Age and belief aren't weaknesses, they're lenses through which strength can shine. By holding firm, asking real questions, and turning the spotlight back onto her interviewer, she reminded audiences across America that satire isn't invincible and truth doesn't always wear a smirk. In today's polarized media landscape, the one who listens, speaks with intention, and refuses to play by someone else's script just might end up writing the story everyone remembers.